Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, there comes a moment when a heart grows tired of carrying everything in silence. Not because it has stopped believing in hope, but because it has spent too long pretending that nothing is wrong. Today is that moment. Your soulmate sits alone in a quiet room as the evening light slowly fades beyond the window. The world outside continues as it always has. Cars pass by, neighbors greet one another, children laugh somewhere in the distance, and the wind gently moves through the trees. Yet inside their heart, everything feels different. For a long time they believed they could keep going without speaking about what they truly felt. They convinced themselves that if they stayed busy enough, smiled often enough, and carried every burden without complaint, the weight would eventually disappear on its own. Instead, the silence only became heavier. Every day they collected another unspoken thought, another unanswered question, another feeling they pushed aside because they believed it was easier to remain quiet than to risk being misunderstood. At first those hidden emotions seemed small, almost insignificant, but little by little they gathered until they became impossible to ignore. This morning began like every other morning. They woke before sunrise, prepared a simple cup of coffee, and stood by the window watching the first rays of light spread across the sky. Usually that peaceful view helped calm their thoughts, but today something felt different. Instead of bringing comfort, the silence asked a question they could no longer avoid. How much longer can I keep pretending that everything is fine? The question lingered in their mind as they stepped outside and began walking through familiar streets. Every corner held a memory. Every ordinary place reminded them that life is made of countless small moments that often pass unnoticed until they are gone. As they reached a quiet park, they noticed an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench, carefully knitting a warm scarf. Birds gathered nearby, and every few moments she smiled softly at them as though they were old friends. Your soulmate greeted her politely before continuing along the path, but after a few steps she called out, "Young friend, would you sit with me for just a minute?" There was something kind in her voice that made it impossible to refuse. They sat beside her, and for a while neither of them spoke. The only sounds were leaves rustling gently in the breeze and birds singing from the branches above. Finally, the woman looked at the half-finished scarf resting in her lap and quietly said, "Do you know why I still make these?" Your soulmate smiled and guessed that perhaps they were gifts for family. She shook her head gently. "Some are. But many are for people I have never met. Every winter someone out there is cold, lonely, or forgotten. I may never know their name, but kindness does not need an introduction before it begins." Those words settled deeply into your soulmate's heart. The woman continued, "People often believe the strongest person is the one who never asks for help and never speaks about what they feel. I have lived long enough to know the opposite is true. The strongest hearts are honest hearts. They know when to carry others, and they know when to allow others to carry them." Your soulmate remained silent because those words described exactly what had been missing from their own life. They had spent so much time trying to appear strong that they had forgotten strength and honesty belong together. Before leaving, the elderly woman folded the scarf carefully and smiled once more. "Promise yourself something today," she said. "Do not allow another important conversation to become another lifelong regret." Those words followed your soulmate long after they left the park. They walked slowly through the town, noticing details they had overlooked countless times before. A florist carefully arranging fresh flowers before opening the shop. A father kneeling beside his young son, patiently helping him zip up his school bag. A bus driver waiting an extra few seconds for an elderly passenger to reach the door safely. None of these people realized they were teaching anyone anything, yet every simple act quietly reminded your soulmate that kindness often speaks more loudly than grand speeches. They realized that the people who leave the deepest mark on the world are rarely the loudest voices. More often, they are the ones who quietly choose compassion when no one is watching. As the afternoon passed, your soulmate stopped at a small bookshop to escape a sudden shower. While browsing the shelves, they noticed an old journal resting alone in a display case. Its cover was plain and worn, yet one sentence was written across the front in elegant handwriting. The words you never speak become the stories you never finish. They stood there reading that sentence again and again. It felt as though it had been written specifically for that moment. They bought the journal without hesitation and carried it home beneath the fading evening sky. Once inside, they placed it gently on the table and opened the very first page. For several minutes the page remained blank because they did not know where to begin. Then, almost without thinking, they wrote a single sentence. "Please open this before I give up." They stopped writing and quietly looked at those words. Tears slowly filled their eyes, not because they were giving up on life, but because they were giving up on pretending. They were tired of hiding gratitude that deserved to be spoken. Tired of delaying apologies that could heal old wounds. Tired of assuming people somehow knew what was in their heart without ever hearing the words themselves. They understood that silence can protect us for a little while, but if we remain silent forever, it eventually becomes another prison. "My child," your soulmate continued writing. They wrote about every person who had quietly changed their life through ordinary acts of kindness. The teacher who believed in them when they doubted themselves. The neighbor who appeared with warm food during a difficult season without expecting anything in return. The stranger who once offered an encouraging smile on a day when everything felt overwhelming. The family member who patiently forgave mistakes instead of keeping score. As those memories filled the pages, they realized something beautiful. Life had never been empty of hope. They had simply become so focused on carrying hidden burdens that they forgot how much goodness had always surrounded them. Every page reminded them that no one is meant to carry every weight alone. Every chapter reminded them that courage is not the absence of struggle but the willingness to face it honestly. When the final rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, they placed the pen down for a moment and whispered softly, "I can't do this anymore." Those words were not a surrender. They were a decision. A decision to stop hiding behind silence. A decision to stop postponing meaningful conversations. A decision to stop believing that tomorrow would always offer another chance to say what should be spoken today. In that quiet room, with the first page of the journal now filled, your soulmate felt something they had not experienced in a long time, a gentle sense of peace. The burden had not completely disappeared, but it no longer belonged to silence alone. They knew there were still many pages left to write, many truths left to share, and one message still waiting to be revealed. As they slowly turned to the next blank page, they took a deep breath, steadied their hand, and whispered, "If you only knew what happened today, you would understand why I can no longer keep this inside." Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, your soulmate slowly turns the page, and for several moments the pen remains suspended above the paper. They know that once these words are written, there will be no returning to the comfortable silence that has hidden their heart for so long. The room feels unusually still. Rain taps gently against the window, the clock continues its steady rhythm, and the warm glow of a single lamp stretches across the notebook. Everything around them appears ordinary, yet nothing inside them feels the same. Earlier that day they believed they could continue pretending that everything was under control. They thought they could keep smiling, keep reassuring everyone that they were fine, and keep carrying every unanswered question alone. But something happened that quietly dismantled every wall they had spent years building around their heart. It was not a dramatic event that anyone else would have noticed. It was a series of ordinary moments that slowly revealed an extraordinary truth. After leaving the bookshop, your soulmate wandered through the town without any clear destination. Their thoughts felt heavier than their footsteps. They passed a small community center where volunteers were preparing meals for families who had fallen on difficult times. Through the open doorway they watched people of every age working side by side. Some chopped vegetables, others arranged tables, while a few simply welcomed visitors with genuine smiles that carried no judgment. Curious, your soulmate stepped inside and offered to help. No one asked who they were or why they had come. A warm smile was enough to make them feel like they already belonged. For the next hour they quietly helped package meals, listening as strangers shared stories of resilience, gratitude, and unexpected kindness. One elderly volunteer smiled while carefully folding napkins and said, "People often think they come here to give something away. Most of us discover we receive far more than we ever bring." Those words lingered long after the conversation ended. Your soulmate realized they had spent years believing strength meant handling every burden without anyone's support, yet here were people proving that sharing life's weight often makes everyone stronger. When the final meal was packed, a little boy approached carrying a drawing made with bright-colored pencils. It showed two people standing beneath a large tree with the words, "Thank you for helping." The picture was simple, the lines uneven, and the colors stretched beyond the edges, but to your soulmate it felt more valuable than anything they had received in years. The child smiled proudly before running back to his family, unaware that his small gesture had quietly transformed another person's evening. My child, your soulmate folded the drawing carefully and placed it inside the notebook, determined never to lose the reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can become unforgettable to someone else. As they continued walking home, they noticed an elderly street musician sitting beside a fountain, gently playing an old violin. Only a handful of people paused to listen before continuing with their busy lives. Your soulmate remained there until the final note faded into the evening air. Afterwards they thanked the musician for the beautiful performance. The old man smiled with peaceful eyes and replied, "Music cannot stop difficult days from coming, but sometimes it reminds tired hearts that they are still capable of feeling hope." Those simple words echoed deeply because they described exactly what was happening inside them. They were beginning to remember that hope is not always loud. Often it arrives quietly, disguised as an ordinary conversation, a shared smile, or a stranger's unexpected kindness. Continuing toward home, they crossed a small bridge where the river reflected the colors of the setting sun. They stopped in the middle and watched the water flow steadily beneath them. The river never argued with the rocks in its path. It simply continued moving forward, finding another way around every obstacle. Standing there, your soulmate understood that they had been resisting their own emotions for far too long. Instead of allowing honesty to move naturally through their life, they had built barriers of fear, uncertainty, and pride. Those barriers had protected them for a while, but they had also prevented healing from reaching the places where it was needed most. As darkness settled across the sky, they finally returned home carrying the notebook, the child's drawing, and a heart that felt completely different from the one that had left that morning. They sat quietly, opened to the next blank page, and began writing again. Today I discovered that pretending to be strong is exhausting. Real strength is allowing truth to breathe. Once those words appeared on the page, everything else followed naturally. They wrote about the volunteers who gave without asking for recognition. They wrote about the child whose drawing reminded them that kindness is remembered long after words are forgotten. They wrote about the violinist who taught them that hope often returns through the simplest moments. They wrote about the river that refused to stop flowing simply because obstacles stood in its way. Every memory became another reason to stop hiding behind silence. My child, as the evening grew later, your soulmate noticed 11:11 glowing on the clock beside the notebook. Earlier in the day they had smiled after receiving a receipt with 222 printed at the end, and later they passed a building marked 444. Many people enjoy treating repeating numbers like these as gentle reminders to pause and reflect. Instead of searching for hidden meanings, your soulmate allowed those moments to become simple questions. Have I thanked the people who quietly carried me through difficult seasons? Have I encouraged someone today? Have I chosen patience instead of frustration? Have I spoken honestly when honesty was needed? Those questions became far more important than the numbers themselves because they pointed toward the kind of person they wanted to become. They continued writing until page after page was filled with gratitude instead of fear. They remembered the schoolteacher who stayed after class to help a struggling student without expecting praise. They remembered a nurse who offered calm words to anxious families during long nights in the hospital. They remembered a neighbor who quietly repaired an elderly couple's broken fence while they were away because he knew they could not manage it alone. None of those people considered themselves extraordinary, yet each one had quietly changed someone else's life. Your soulmate finally understood that the world is held together by countless unseen acts of goodness. They realized they wanted to become one of those quiet sources of hope instead of someone trapped behind walls of silence. Slowly they closed the notebook and rested both hands upon its cover. The words, "Please open this before I give up," no longer felt like a cry of defeat. They had become an invitation to choose honesty over fear, connection over isolation, gratitude over assumption, and hope over despair. Looking out through the rain-speckled window, your soulmate whispered softly, "I thought I was reaching the end, but perhaps this is where everything truly begins." They smiled for the first time that day because the burden they had carried alone no longer felt impossible. It had been transformed by truth, strengthened by kindness, and lightened by the simple decision to finally let their heart speak. Before extinguishing the lamp, they wrote one final sentence across the bottom of the page, a sentence that would prepare you for everything still waiting to be revealed. "Tomorrow I will tell you the one truth I have spent the longest trying to hide, because my heart cannot carry it in silence any longer." Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, as the first light of morning quietly enters the room, your soulmate awakens with one thought still echoing inside their heart. The sentence they wrote the night before refuses to leave their mind. Tomorrow I will tell you the one truth I have spent the longest trying to hide, because my heart cannot carry it in silence any longer. They sit at the edge of the bed for several minutes, taking slow breaths, gathering the courage they know this day will require. The notebook lies on the table exactly where they left it, but somehow it feels different now. It is no longer just paper filled with words. It has become a mirror reflecting everything they have spent years refusing to admit. For so long they believed the greatest danger was speaking honestly. Today they finally understand the greater danger has always been remaining silent. Silence slowly convinced them that their thoughts did not matter, that their gratitude could wait, that difficult conversations could always be postponed until tomorrow. But tomorrow kept arriving, and every tomorrow quietly became another yesterday filled with things left unsaid. They realize they no longer want to measure life by opportunities they missed. They want to measure it by moments when they found the courage to speak with kindness, sincerity, and compassion. Carrying the notebook beneath one arm, they step outside into the cool morning air. The streets are peaceful. Shopkeepers sweep the paths outside their stores. Fresh bread fills the air with a comforting aroma from the bakery at the corner. A newspaper delivery bicycle rolls slowly through the neighborhood, and somewhere nearby a church bell marks the beginning of another ordinary day. Yet this ordinary morning feels unlike any other because your soulmate is finally seeing it through grateful eyes. They notice an elderly man carefully watering flowers planted outside a small library. Curious, they ask whether he works there. The man smiles warmly and replies, "No. I simply enjoy making the entrance a little brighter for everyone who walks through that door." Your soulmate pauses, looking at the colorful flowers gently moving in the morning breeze. "Do people know you planted them?" they ask. The man chuckles softly before shaking his head. "Most probably don't. But kindness doesn't lose its value just because no one knows where it came from." Those words settle deeply within them. They realize they have spent far too much time worrying about whether people understood them while forgetting that genuine goodness asks for no recognition. Continuing along the street, they arrive at the library itself. Inside, the atmosphere is calm and welcoming. Shelves filled with books stretch from floor to ceiling, each one holding countless stories, lessons, and memories. Near the back of the building, they notice an elderly librarian carefully repairing the torn pages of an old children's book instead of replacing it with a new copy. Curious once again, your soulmate asks why she spends so much time restoring books that many people might overlook. She gently smooths one fragile page before answering, because some stories deserve another chance to be read. Her answer lingers in the silence that follows. Without realizing it, your soulmate smiles. They begin wondering if hearts are not so different from books. Sometimes they become worn by disappointment, marked by misunderstandings, or bent beneath the weight of difficult seasons. Yet with patience, honesty, and care, perhaps they too deserve another chance. Leaving the library, they continue their walk toward the town square where a local craftsman is restoring an old clock tower. The wooden ladder beside the tower reaches almost to the highest window, and the craftsman patiently polishes gears that most people passing below will never even notice. Your soulmate watches for a while before asking whether anyone ever appreciates work hidden inside the tower where no one can see it. The craftsman laughs kindly and says, "People may never notice the gears, but they would certainly notice if they stopped working." That simple reply becomes another unforgettable lesson. The strongest foundations in life are often invisible. Trust is built through countless promises quietly kept. Friendships grow stronger through ordinary conversations shared over many years. Families remain united because someone chooses patience during difficult moments. Love itself is sustained by daily acts of care that often go unseen. My child, every lesson your soulmate receives today points toward the same truth. Life becomes meaningful not because of extraordinary moments alone, but because ordinary choices quietly shape extraordinary character. They return home shortly before sunset, open the notebook once more, and begin writing everything they have learned. Today I discovered that the world continues becoming beautiful because thousands of people choose goodness without expecting recognition. The words flow naturally across the page. They write about the gardener who brightened a library entrance for strangers he would never meet. They write about the librarian who believed every treasured story deserved another chance. They write about the craftsman whose unseen work allowed an entire town to trust the passing of every hour. Each memory reminds them that invisible faithfulness often changes lives more deeply than visible success. They pause for a moment and gaze through the window as evening settles across the sky. The colors of sunset slowly fade into soft shades of blue and silver. In the quiet reflection of the glass, they see not the tired person they believed themselves to be yesterday, but someone slowly learning to live with greater honesty and gratitude. At that very moment they notice 11:11 glowing softly on the digital clock across the room. Earlier in the day they smiled after receiving receipt number 222, and later they walked past a building displaying 444 above its entrance. Many people enjoy treating repeating numbers like these as reminders to pause and reflect. Your soulmate chooses to let them become gentle invitations to ask themselves important questions. Have I thanked those who quietly supported me? Have I become a source of encouragement rather than criticism? Have I offered forgiveness where resentment once lived? Have I spoken with honesty instead of allowing fear to choose my words? Those reflections bring peace because they no longer seek answers outside themselves. They understand that every meaningful change begins with daily choices made inside the heart. As darkness fills the room once again, they continue writing about every quiet hero they have encountered throughout life. The school caretaker who greeted every child by name. The baker who secretly left fresh bread outside the homes of elderly neighbors during winter. The bus driver who patiently waited for late passengers instead of driving away. The nurse whose reassuring smile comforted frightened families through long nights. The teacher who stayed after school simply because one struggling student needed another chance. None of these people considered themselves extraordinary. Yet each one left behind something far greater than recognition. They left behind hope. Your soulmate realizes that hope is never created through loud promises alone. It grows through consistency, kindness, integrity, patience, and ordinary moments repeated faithfully over time. That understanding changes everything. The words, "I can't do this anymore," suddenly reveal their true meaning. They were never a declaration of defeat. They were a farewell to fear, a goodbye to pretending, and a promise that honesty would finally replace silence. Closing the notebook, your soulmate places both hands upon its cover and quietly whispers, "I have carried these truths long enough. They deserve to be lived, not merely written." A peaceful smile appears across their face because they know the hardest part is finally behind them. Tomorrow will not begin with uncertainty. It will begin with courage. Before blowing out the candle beside the notebook, they write one final sentence at the bottom of the page, carefully underlining every word as though making a promise to themselves. There is still one final truth waiting to be spoken, and once you hear it, you will understand why my heart could never remain silent again. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, the final page of the notebook rests open before your soulmate, untouched for several quiet minutes. The morning sun slowly fills the room, yet they make no effort to rush the moment. They know that some words deserve patience before they are spoken. For years they believed the most difficult part of life was facing disappointment, but today they understand that an even greater challenge is allowing the heart to remain open after disappointment has visited. Closing the heart may feel like protection, yet it quietly prevents hope, gratitude, forgiveness, and joy from finding their way back inside. That is the lesson this journey has been leading toward from the very beginning. Your soulmate gently picks up the notebook and walks outside, feeling the cool morning breeze against their face. The streets are beginning to fill with life. Shopkeepers greet familiar customers with warm smiles. Children hurry toward school carrying backpacks almost larger than themselves. A street cleaner quietly sweeps fallen leaves from the pavement before most people even notice they were there. Watching these ordinary scenes unfold, your soulmate realizes that the world continues because countless people faithfully complete small acts of care that often go unseen. They remember the gardener who planted flowers for strangers, the librarian who repaired worn-out books, the craftsman who restored the hidden gears inside the old clock tower, the volunteer who prepared meals without expecting recognition, and the elderly woman who knitted scarves for people she would probably never meet. Every one of those encounters carried the same lesson. A meaningful life is not built by one extraordinary moment. It is built through thousands of ordinary choices made with kindness, honesty, patience, and compassion. Those thoughts remain in their heart as they continue walking toward the edge of town where a peaceful hill overlooks the valley below. At the top sits an elderly stone mason carefully restoring an old memorial wall that has stood there for generations. Curious, your soulmate watches him replace damaged stones one at a time. After a while they ask, wouldn't it be faster to tear everything down and build something completely new? The mason smiles gently before brushing dust from another stone. Perhaps, he replies, but strength isn't always found in replacing what has been worn by time. Sometimes strength is found in restoring what still has a good foundation. Those words settle deeply into your soulmate's heart because they realize the same truth applies to people. A tired heart does not always need to be replaced with a different life. Sometimes it simply needs honesty, patience, forgiveness, gratitude, and the courage to heal what has quietly been neglected. They thank the old mason and continue their journey, carrying another lesson that feels destined to remain with them forever. As the afternoon unfolds, they stop beside a small lake where the water reflects the blue sky so clearly that it almost looks like another world resting beneath the surface. Sitting quietly on a wooden bench, they watch gentle ripples spread outward whenever a breeze touches the water. It reminds them that every action creates effects far beyond what the eye can immediately see. A single encouraging sentence can remain in someone's memory for years. A patient conversation can restore hope during a difficult season. One unexpected act of generosity can inspire countless others to choose kindness in return. In exactly the same way, every harsh word, every broken promise, and every unnecessary silence can also travel farther than we realize. Your soulmate closes their eyes for a moment and whispers softly, "I want my words to leave peace wherever they go." That simple promise feels more valuable than any achievement they once believed would bring lasting happiness. Returning home in the evening, they open the notebook one final time. They no longer write from fear. They write from clarity. "Today I finally understand why my heart refused to remain silent," they begin. "It was never asking me to chase perfection. It was asking me to choose sincerity. It was never asking me to impress the world. It was asking me to become someone who quietly leaves every person a little more hopeful than before." They continue filling the last page with memories collected throughout this journey. They remember the elderly woman whose knitted scarves carried warmth beyond winter. They remember the baker whose kindness arrived before it was requested. They remember the child whose simple drawing reminded them that appreciation does not need complicated words. They remember the violinist who taught that hope can return through the gentlest melody. They remember the river that kept moving despite every obstacle, the flowers blooming without applause, and the lighthouse faithfully shining for travelers who would never know the keeper's name. Every memory becomes another reminder that the greatest influence often comes from ordinary faithfulness rather than extraordinary recognition. My child, as the room slowly grows darker, your soulmate notices 11:11 glowing quietly on the clock. Earlier that afternoon they smiled after receiving receipt number 222, and before returning home they passed a building marked 444. Many people enjoy treating repeating numbers like these as reminders to pause and reflect. Your soulmate smiles gently and allows those moments to become simple invitations to ask themselves, "Have I chosen kindness today? Have I expressed gratitude while I still had the opportunity? Have I forgiven where forgiveness was needed? Have I spoken words that encourage rather than discourage? Have I become the kind of person I once hoped to meet?" Those questions no longer create fear inside them. Instead, they create peace because they understand that every sunrise offers another opportunity to answer them through actions instead of promises. They close the notebook slowly and place both hands across its cover. For the first time since beginning this journey, there are no tears in their eyes, only quiet gratitude. The words, "Please open this before I give up. I can't do this anymore," have revealed their true meaning. They were never about surrender. They were about refusing to continue living behind walls of silence. They were about giving up fear instead of giving up hope. They were about leaving behind hesitation, replacing regret with gratitude, replacing isolation with honest conversation, and replacing hidden burdens with the courage to let others share them. Your soulmate realizes that this has never been only a message for one person. It is a reminder for every heart that has postponed meaningful words, delayed important conversations, or assumed there would always be another tomorrow. Life becomes richer whenever appreciation is spoken today instead of someday. Relationships become stronger whenever honesty replaces assumption. Communities become brighter whenever ordinary people quietly choose compassion over convenience. Before placing the notebook on the shelf, your soulmate writes one final paragraph across the last page, their handwriting calm and steady. If these pages have taught me anything, it is this: never wait for the perfect moment to say thank you, never postpone forgiveness until time has stolen the opportunity, never believe that kindness is too small to matter, and never allow fear to convince you that your sincere words have no value. The greatest gifts we leave behind are not wealth or recognition, but the hope, encouragement, patience, and love we place into the lives of others while we still have the chance. They gently close the notebook, not because the story has ended, but because they now understand that the most important chapter can never be written with ink alone. It must be written through everyday choices, quiet integrity, faithful compassion, and a heart that no longer hides what truly matters. As they look once more through the window at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky, a peaceful smile crosses their face. The burden they carried for so long has finally become something beautiful. It has become wisdom shared instead of pain hidden, gratitude expressed instead of assumed, courage lived instead of imagined, and hope offered instead of withheld. My child, may these words remain with you long after the final page is turned, reminding you that every ordinary day holds another opportunity to encourage someone, forgive someone, appreciate someone, and become the quiet reason another heart believes tomorrow is worth welcoming with hope.